You picture the Middle Ages. Perhaps your mind travels straight to knights in shining armor, noble ladies in flowing gowns, or kings seated on golden thrones. You might imagine the grandeur of castles, the glittering halls of royalty, and the drama of tournaments and crusades. It is a vision full of romance and spectacle, endlessly repeated in films, novels, and games. But here's the truth. That vision belongs to a very small fraction of people, maybe 1%. The overwhelming majority lived a reality far removed from the pageantry. For them, life in the Middle Ages was not glory, but survival. Their days were spent in smoky huts, bent over fields, bound to lords by law, and haunted by famine, disease, and uncertainty. This is not just another story of knights and castles. This is a medieval documentary about the forgotten millions whose hands built Europe stone by stone, whose sweat fed entire kingdoms, and whose struggles shaped the very world we live in today. And yes, it is also a history documentary, because we are peeling back legend and myth to reveal the raw human truth of the past. The fantasy of the Middle Ages versus the reality. The idea of the Middle Ages as a romantic age of chivalry and courtly love is a product of later centuries. Troubadours, poets, and later Renaissance writers polished the image into legend. The knight became a symbol of noble honor, the lady of beauty and virtue, the king of authority and grandeur. But for peasants, who made up between 85 and 90% of the medieval population, those images were distant shadows. The reality of their lives was not written in parchment chronicles, but in mud, hunger, and toil. If we want to understand the medieval world honestly, we must walk into their huts, eat their food, and share their fears. That is the journey of this medieval documentary, to reveal the ordinary people who lived extraordinary struggles. The peasant's home. Imagine waking not to an alarm clock, but to the snuffling of a pig rooting near your bed, or the crowing of a rooster perched on a beam above you. Your home is not a cozy cottage, but a single-room hut, built quickly from whatever materials lie at hand. The walls are wattle and daub, woven sticks plastered with mud, straw, and manure. The roof is thatched with reeds or straw, a haven for mice and fleas. The floor is packed earth, damp and uneven. Rain leaks in, and the smoke of the hearth clings to everything. There are no windows of glass, only small slits stuffed with cloth or hide to block drafts. Privacy doesn't exist. Parents, children, and grandparents all share the same cramped space. Every moment of life, arguments, childbirth, sickness, death, happens in that single room. This was not misery alone. It was practicality. Archaeological sites like Warham Percy in Yorkshire reveal that such huts, crude as they seem, could last generations with constant repair. In this medieval documentary, it's important to see not only the hardship, but the resilience. Peasants used the resources available to survive in an unforgiving world. Living with animals. Animals shared the space too. A pig, a few chickens, maybe even a cow or ox if you were fortunate. They weren't pets. They were lifelines. Their presence brought warmth during winter, eggs and milk for food, and meat for the rare occasion of slaughter. Yet this closeness came with costs. The air was heavy with dung, smoke, and sweat. Vermin thrived in the straw. Fleas and lice carried diseases. Still, peasants accepted it as normal. To them, animals were companions of necessity, woven into the household just as much as children. The hearth, heart of the home. At the center of this smoky hut was the hearth, an open fire pit dug into the floor, ringed with stones. It was the lifeline of the household. From its flames came light, warmth, and cooked food. But without chimneys, smoke drifted through the roof or slits in the walls, filling the air with haze. Eyes stung, lungs ached, coughs were common. Long-term exposure caused damage we would now call chronic respiratory illness. But the hearth was indispensable. Families gathered around its glow to eat, to pray, to tell stories. It was danger and comfort at once, the pulse of medieval domestic life. The morning meal. Your day began with food, if you could call it that. Breakfast was often pottage, a bubbling stew of grains like oats, barley, or rye, thickened with vegetables such as leeks, peas, onions, or cabbage. It was cooked in a pot that never fully emptied, reheated day after day, ingredients added whenever they could be spared. Bread was ever present, but not the soft white loaves of today. It was dark, coarse, often full of grit from the millstones that ground the flour. Teeth wore down early, and abscesses were common. To drink, you had small ale, weakly fermented beer, safer than water that might carry disease. Even children drank it. Milk was rarely consumed raw. It was better used for making butter and cheese. This was fuel for labor, not indulgence, but sustenance, and sustenance meant survival. Childhood in the Middle Ages. As a child, your life was not filled with toys or school books. By age 7, you were expected to work. Boys helped herd animals or fetch water. Girls cared for younger siblings or tended the garden. Play existed. Wooden dolls, simple games, rough football, but it was always secondary to duty. Education was rare. A few village priests taught letters to boys, mostly for religious purposes, but the majority of peasants were illiterate. Their world carried not in books, but in stories and memory. In this medieval documentary, it's worth pausing to note. Childhood as we know it did not exist. Children were treated as small adults, woven into the labor of survival from the moment they could walk and carry a bucket. Women's work. Women's roles were immense, though often overlooked. In addition to working in fields during peak seasons, women maintained the household economy. They spun wool into thread, wove cloth, baked bread, brewed ale, milked animals, raised children, cooked, and managed gardens. Many were skilled in herbal medicine, tending to wounds and illnesses with remedies passed through generations. They bore children in harsh conditions, often losing their lives in childbirth. Their labor, though invisible in chronicles, was the foundation of medieval survival. The rhythm of the seasons. Time in the Middle Ages was not measured by hours and minutes, but by the cycle of the seasons. The year was divided into labor. Spring, sowing seeds by hand, scattering grain across open strips of land. Summer, weeding, haymaking, tending crops under relentless sun. Autumn, harvest, the frantic rush to cut grain with sickles before rain ruined it. Winter, threshing stored grain, spinning wool, mending tools, and keeping fires alive. This was not choice, but necessity. Survival depended on the earth's rhythm. A poor harvest meant hunger. A failed harvest meant famine. Feudal obligations. And over all this labor hung the weight of feudalism. Peasants were not free owners of their land. They worked under lords who demanded corvée, days of unpaid labor on the lord's own fields. They paid fees for using his mill, his oven, his press. They gave 1/10 of their produce to the church as tithe. Every loaf of bread, every jug of ale, every egg from a chicken carried a cost. The system was designed not for fairness but for control. It ensured that wealth flowed upward, from peasant hands to noble tables. This medieval documentary is not about kings. It is about the people who fed them, community and resilience. Yet to paint medieval life only in misery would be unfair. Villages were tight-knit. Neighbors helped each other rebuild huts after fires, shared tools, and supported the sick. Storytelling, songs, and festivals punctuated the grind. Evenings by the hearth were filled with tales of fairies, heroes, and saints. Community was survival. Without it, the harshness of medieval life would have been unbearable. This has been the first chapter of our medieval history documentary series, a glimpse into the daily lives of peasants, the men, women, and children whose hands built the foundations of medieval Europe. If this journey opened your eyes to the realities of the Middle Ages, don't stop here. Subscribe to the channel, share this with fellow history lovers, and watch out for Episode 2, Chains of the Manor, Feudalism and Daily Labor, where we uncover how the system of lords and vassals shaped every moment of a peasant's life.